Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here in the studio. It is a beautiful Thursday afternoon, and I hope wherever you are that you are doing super well. We are busy as usual on the farm, and it is a nice warm day, which I find is rather challenging to be outside and doing things. But I'm excited to spend this time with you. So, like and share and be sure to subscribe to this channel if this is something that you enjoy. And today, what I wanted to try was a slightly different format. As many of you know, I am learning the ropes here in terms of technology, and I really want to have deep conversations with everyone here. And I would like to share a little bit about what I think and what I know, because I feel like this is how we find each other in this big wild world. And so, in addition to loving doing things outside and really enjoying gardening and other types of work, I also really enjoy thinking about deep things, thinking about sort of what life is all about, and sort of philosophizing and imagining that there's some kind of grand reason why you and I are both here. So I'm excited for you to come along with me on this journey. So I'm going to speak a little bit at the beginning of this, and then I'm really excited to look at the comments and see what everyone is discussing, and whatever your reaction is to the things that I'm sharing, I would love to hear about that. So feel free to have conversations in the comment section, and we'll go from there. So this is kind of a letter that I was imagining in my mind that basically I've written to you, the viewer, and to the world. So I wanted to share it with you. And it goes like this. Dear world, my name is Evie. I live in a large old barn nestled at the foot of the Berkshire Mountains. It's so beautiful here. It's stunningly gorgeous. There are streams that bubble beside our property and beauty at every single turn. I have never left Massachusetts for longer than a few years. This is where I was born. And this is where I will probably die too. New England is familiar to me, and I love the land that I've grown to know so well. The woods, the plants, the creatures are all like family because I've lived here for a long time and I notice them. I want to tell you a story about long ago. Today, I'm worlds healthier than I was just several years ago. I might not have recognized myself in comparison. I don't think you would have either. Many years ago, I was constantly numbing myself from everything around me. I had difficult situations at every turn. I was struggling to figure out what I could gift and give to the world, and I was having a lot of health issues. I won't go into too many of the details, but the physical and psychic pain that I lived in was phenomenal. If any of you have had chronic pain or health issues that you wake up and cope with day after day after day, I know that you know what I'm talking about. And for so many people, you feel really isolated and alone with all of the challenges that you have, and there's nobody to really turn to that can give you either support or some good guidance on how to get out of whatever you're stuck in. And I felt really, really stuck. It seemed that no one could comprehend sort of the pain that I was enduring or could help me figure out how to control it or manage it. I had to use every ounce of my strength and energy to try and just be with the pain. And a lot of days, alcohol was the best relief that I had from those spasms. My back would just crick up. I could barely stand up straight. It became hard to walk, impossible to drive. It was really very miserable. And unfortunately, I was only 18 years old when this all began to happen and really affect my life. And I felt like some piece of my vitality and youth was stolen. And I had a lot of feelings about that. mainly just trying to admit to myself that I couldn't do everything I wanted to do and be everything I wanted to be. And that was incredibly painful. And when I first started down this journey of trying to understand what was going on in my body and what wasn't, what was wrong, people didn't really believe me. I had a lot of issues where I was feeling gaslit by my doctors, and, people just took one look at me and thought that I looked healthy and therefore I was fine. And I was really suffering so much on the inside, just trying to cope with how much energy it required to just get up every day and do the very basic things. I was given a lot of pharmaceutical drugs to drown out the pain, and it just went from one thing to another. It was like, here, take this because this will help you feel better. And then here's another drug on top of that to mask the symptoms that one, the side effects that particular drug gives you, and on and on. And it was awful. And before I knew it, I felt like an elderly woman, even though I was in my early 20s, carrying around a bag full of drugs that I really couldn't function without. And it was so scary. I couldn't afford at that point in my life to try very many types of healing. So I was stuck sort of with the generic, mainstream medicine, our Western medicine. And it really wasn't advantageous for me because I was so young. I had countless, cortisone shots and, like I said, all the pharmaceutical drugs and steroids and this and that. And it just, none of it was helping. And the reason that was they found out that I had scoliosis and I had parts in my spine that were really damaged and collapsing. And so I needed to have a fusion, which, was kind of the necessary evil. And I understood by the time I went into that procedure. I'd had 2 previous surgeries, countless other procedures, and I knew that I was kind of saving it for the end of my life. Like, what am I going to do when I'm 75 and I need, something's going wrong with my spine again? Because you can only have some of these types of surgeries so many times. And, I'd blown out a couple of discs in my back, and then the bones were just like bone on bone, and they weren't healthy looking. And so I'd really tried to hold off on the fusion, but it became sort of a last resort, and it crept up on me in my 30s. And I was like, all right, I just have to do this because this isn't living. And the place that I got to was so dark and sad that I almost couldn't hang on anymore, which was terrifying. But it was really humbling as well to be sort of at the mercy of other people. And I think it taught me a lot about how to treat other people, because I remember feeling just so not weak, but vulnerable and really in need of others' compassion and caring, and for them to truly look at the situation and understand, and see where I was coming from and believe me that I was having this level of discomfort and so on. So in many ways it became an introduction to the story of my life, which is about deeply empathizing and wanting to be there for other people. And because I'm a highly sensitive person, it actually kind of helped hone that skill for me, which was amazing. So the other thing that was happening at this time was I was a mom of a sweet little girl, and she needed me, and it was so hard to not be able to pick her up and hold her. I remember the last time I held her, and I remember her saying to me, like, Mom, when you get better, maybe you can carry me again. And I never did. And there's grief still that I have around that, because it was just so unbelievably hard for everybody, not just me, but for my kids, my family, and the people around me that loved me. So today, now, here in 2024, unless I'm on my feet for a really long time, I'm actually relatively pain-free, which is incredible. Almost 10 years after that horrific surgery, and it was a long one, and I have screws that belong in car parts instead of a human body in my back now, and I can't do certain things, and I have to be more judicious and careful about the activities I do choose to do, for the most part, as long as I don't push some of those boundaries, I'm relatively pain free. And that's an amazing thing. It's amazing to me that I can still do all these little pieces of things that I love. Um, Being on the farm and trying to take care of the animals and do all the chores that need doing and to weed the garden and to put in all these fruit trees and all the stuff, the whirlwind of activity that we have going on here. It's really challenging day to day to figure out kind of what my body's capable of and to find out where that edge is where I'm not pushing myself beyond it, because re-injuring myself at this point would just be awful. Um, so even though I am for the most part pain free, I do sometimes still have to take medication, which is frustrating, but I'm getting less and less reliant on that. And that makes me feel good. I've also learned how to ask for help without feeling ashamed about needing it. I used to carry a lot of shoulds, and I would should myself about being able to do something. And, also because I was young, I think people expected that I could handle things. And it was really, really scary and really hard to sort of drop whatever pride I had and say, I can't carry this to my car. Could you help me with it? I can't get these groceries in, like whatever it was. And I've gotten a little bit better at that. And during this time, of course, the whole time I was asking myself, like, is this, is there something I did? Like, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Louise Hayes, but she talks a lot about how a lot of the times when we have physical illness that we struggle with in our bodies, that it's the result of a connection between some deep emotional things that we haven't sorted out yet. And so I was a little bit worried and nervous that maybe there was something in my background that I hadn't looked at that was contributing to this physical issue. And of course there was. In the beginning, when I was talking about the psychic pain I was in, I had a very tumultuous childhood, and the abuse that I went through and just the effect it had on my nervous system was huge. And I can't understate the effects of that and how long they've been with me. And so now I sort of see it as like a big soup, you know, all these ingredients together kind of making up the whole situation. And it wasn't any one thing, but it was a perfect storm, if you will, of all these different variables. And so, in addition to having had those surgeries and to having a fusion, I also began doing a lot of work on my internal world. Excuse me, because it became really apparent to me that you know it all it was all connected. The emotional feelings that I was carrying were also connected and influenced by what was going on in my with my body. So if I had a really bad pain day, it would cause like a depression or anxiety, which would then kick off like the inner critics of what is it that I'm contributing to the world if I can't do X, Y, and Z? And then that would just, I think, make the pain even worse if that's possible. So it was tough to learn how to get out of those cycles that I would inevitably kick off when I wasn't just being conscious of my own thoughts and behaviors. One thing that I've really changed since I've been on this healing journey was to focus on healing my excuse me, my physical body with my diet. I've cut out sugar and gluten and alcohol. And then I also take some basic vitamins and supplements, very basic. Like I take vitamin D because my levels were low, even though I'm outside a lot. I had a bunch of blood work done, found out, various things that are helpful in terms of knowing what to take and why. And that was a huge part of my healing process as well. What's really been advantageous, though, is that I've been surrounded by love. And I cannot overstate how important that is for each of us to have a place where we feel truly nourished. I have so much gratitude for my really wonderful partner, Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity, who those of you who are on this channel because you've subscribed to know who I'm talking about. Um, his mission really sings to my heart. It's aligned with my own beliefs and values and what I find to be important in this world. Um, and what's remarkable is that when I'm around him, it feels so native, like I'm hanging out with somebody I've known for my entire life. And my body doesn't get worked up into a stress of like hypervigilance or anything else. I just feel relaxed and comfortable and safe. And my heart is wide open to him and his to me. And there's something about that that has had a huge healing effect. He was beside me when I stood up for myself after being taken advantage of. I had some situations I had to address and set boundaries, and he was so solid, and he really believed that the things that I loved were worth fighting for. He communicated that he saw things in me about my potential as a human that I didn't even see at that point, and that I couldn't see because I was so mixed up and clouded by all the trauma and, of course, alcohol. If, as I'm sure many people that listening to this are familiar, alcohol really, it down regulates your system, but which can feel good if you're having anxiety, but it actually exacerbates things because it makes everything less clear and cloudier, and that can be really challenging as well. And so he could see these pieces even when I just could not understand what value I had, and I had to go on a long journey to find it. But it was so critical for me to just have that one person who was looking at me and saying, "You're worth it. You've got this." Such a huge blessing for me. And he did all those things out of love for me, and he doesn't expect or want anything in return, which is also so powerful for me. I'd grown up in a situation where, as many people do, love feels kind of conditional. As long as you're doing what everyone else expects you to do in school and you're not causing trouble and you're not sort of doing anything out of the box, you're going to be accepted or loved or seen. And so for me, it was unfamiliar to be around a person who could just be okay with where I was and to support me in that and to help reflect that back to me so that I could get used to the comfort there and the relaxation. And our story, which someday I'll tell, is a really complex, beautiful story of how transformative love is. And I'm sure everybody has a story like it in their lives of a friendship or a person or an animal that they've just felt incredibly connected with and whose presence is still felt even if that individual is no longer with us. And I know it's cliche, but it has been the most profound blessing for me to have received in this life. And it feels like it was meant to be. Like we had every logical sort of in when we were initially starting to be together. I didn't know if it made sense logistically, but the universe just kept gifting us to each other and pushing us in the same direction. And finally, I think I stopped being stubborn and was like, all right, let's give this a shot. And here we are. And we're getting married this October, which I'm really excited about. And we've been engaged for over 5 years now. So it's been a long time coming, but I'm just so thrilled to have found my soul partner. I'm his Bonnie and he's my Clyde. He's my ride or die man, and I feel that's just how we're going down, and I love that. And I think what's interesting to me about this is how I could have met Chris, way in my youth, and if I hadn't been able to surrender to that love, I wouldn't have been able to go on this journey of growth and change. And so it finds us when we're ready and able to receive it. I know there were people in my youth that cared about me, and I probably did not. Um, I guess maybe I would say I don't know if I evaluated them most fairly, but I was just going through so much stuff that I had no ability to really assess relationship potential at that point. And, I think it's important for us to find a place, whether it's a relationship with our higher power, a partner, a friend, an animal, to be able to surrender ourselves and be in that beautiful dance that happens. It's an attraction, which makes it sound sort of sexual, but it's not necessarily sexual. It's just two beings being attracted to each other, and there's a charge there, and there's something that draws you to that person over and over again. And there's something about how when we give up our control and let the universe or God or whatever this amazing, I don't even know what to call it. It feels like a video game sometimes, but when you co-create with spirit in that way, when you co-create with the universe, just incredible things begin to happen. And, now as I'm in my mid 40s, as time is going on, there are lots of people and places and communities that I used to feel a part of back when I was younger. And there are people that, I no longer am in contact with. And some of those people had a huge impact on me and how I see the world. And a lot of them were very beautiful people, but I was just either too sick with pain or it just was not in a place in my life where I could really recognize and appreciate them. And, I send them blessings in my mind, and I hope that they know how important they were to me. And some of these people have died and are gone from this physical world, and some of them live, geographically far away. Excuse me. And it's been a really long time since I've been able to give them a hug. And then there are other people that, have made decisions that took them and their life in other directions, and our paths just diverged. And it feels, I don't know, just sort of part of life at this point. I understand how it happens and I accept that it does occur. But, over the last 3 years, it's been hard not to notice who sort of passed away from the mind virus that seems to be going on in our society. And the number of people that I lost at the juncture of everything that happened around COVID was really just chilling and hard. And the war that's going on, I think it's for many things. I think for love of money. I think people are really obsessed with, and this goes to like the corporatization of America and the globalization that's happened, but people are obsessed with money. And so for love of money, the war being fought is for our attention, really our eyeballs, and also to distract us and all the different distractions that we can engage with and that they can sell us, right? And then they can also sell us the antidote for how disconnected and sad or anxious we feel when we realize that we're not on our path or that something doesn't feel right. And it makes me frustrated sometimes. I have like a very interesting relationship that I'm constantly tracking in myself with technology, because on some level it's allowing us to sit here together right now, for me to be here with you, which is a miracle. Like my great 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 grandmother would have never believed that this was possible, right? But these same screens take us away from our soul path as well. And they leave us, which leaves us rather feeling really crippled and, anxiety ridden and depressed and demoralized, because we're disconnected from our real purpose in some cases. And sometimes it's a big event that disconnects us. And sometimes it's just, the buildup of little tiny things where we're just less aware of our surroundings. We're paying less attention to our kids. We're sort of on autopilot and like, yeah. And like, we're just not giving whoever is in our immediate environment our full attention. And I often wonder about what it is that's so different from the screens versus being in person. And it really does seem that there's an energetic exchange that happens between you and me. If we were in the same room together, the energy would be sort of flowing between us. And and it would feed each of us in a very important way. And I don't think that happens. Like, I don't feel nourished after I watch somebody on YouTube. I imagine you probably don't either, but I'm curious to see what you think. So, how do we get out of these ruts where we have, this crippling anxiety, this depression? Um, I think part of it is by talking about it. And that's at least why I'm telling a little bit of my story here today, because I want to reach out there and to find those individuals who would say, yeah, I've felt that too. Or, wow, let me tell you a story about COVID and what I endured. Let me tell you about, the reactions my family had when I decided not to get um, and I think that beginning to talk about it is how we find our people. And it's also, we get to adventure through this world and find our commonalities with other individuals. And I think that's what knits us together, as community, but also as a nation and then as a larger world. But there's some days still where I feel really lonely, and where a large part of me is reminded of that really broken feeling from when I was a younger person. And I think the feeling of powerlessness actually triggers this to come back into my sort of physical awareness. And I have a practice. I work with somatic experiencing work and other sort of modalities, but I try to be with the parts of me that bring up a feeling and just acknowledge it, number one. Um, but I also have learned to see the things that I work with and to really try and find the good in all of that. So, for example, I am a ridiculously sensitive person, and sometimes that extreme sensitivity and, being an empath can feel pretty overwhelming, especially if I'm just kind of letting things flow into my consciousness. Like if I'm on the internet too long listening to the news, like things just affect me in a big way. But that's also totally my superpower. I can read a room in 60 seconds and understand different personalities and traits in people. Um, and the best part of that is I can discern on a gut level before there's actually very much data about which decision I want to make. I can feel that in my body, and it helps me when I have to make a super fast decision and I don't have the data in front of me and I can't contrast and compare. I just ask my body, and my body always tells me. And if you ask Chris how many times my gut turned out to be right, I think he'd probably laugh, because he knows that every time we haven't listened to my gut intuition, it's been no bueno. It's been, not awesome. So we're learning how to utilize this superpower in our lives, but I don't I don't know if this is something you experience as well, but this killer instinct that developed from going through all that chaos that I experienced as a young person has become a potent, sort of useful gift. And, when I find it difficult or confusing to decide who to trust, especially in terms of our leaders and folks that are opining about things online, I just dial into that place and I can understand, like, yes, this person is credible. I just can feel it. And I'm curious if other people that are listening to this right now can feel that as well, and utilize that as part of their information gathering. Um, and there's so many of us right now at this time that are alert to what is happening in our world, and it's not very comfortable. And I just want to say that to normalize that, because we're not crazy. You're not crazy. I'm not crazy. There's a lot going on that is just mind blowing. I never would have thought 20 years ago, if you sort of described today's current events to me, complete with like potential nuclear mutual devastation, like I wouldn't have imagined that that was possible or probable. And here we are sort of in this weird nail biting interlude, and it's really challenging for me, and I imagine it probably is for you as well. Um, I've recently been thinking about uh, James Kunstler's. He wrote a book called The Long Emergency, and it triggers this the things that are going on in the world triggers the survival instinct for me, and it's very familiar. Like I was saying, it's something that I think I experienced as a kid, and I'm saying this because I would love for us to just have awareness of this, because I think it happens to more of the time than we probably realize, where something out there is going on and it mirrors another part of us or our history that we've forgotten about, and it triggers that inside of us, and then we're walking around with a larger than normal charge over whatever it is. And the reason for that is because there's still this residual thing to process. And that's truly the blessing of it as well. So, with everything that's going on in the world, there's really not much we could do about any of it. We can't control it. You know, we can do small things to take steps to sort of be more sovereign in our lives, and do the best we can with the tools that we have. Make no mistake, but at the grand global level, like, am I going to do something amazing that shifts all of that? Probably not, but I can heal myself as best as I possibly can. And so the blessing that this period of time in the world is giving me is the ability to see where I'm still very wounded and unhealed. Because when you think about it, the people in the world that do damage sometimes um, to other people, most of the time they're not maliciously doing that. Most of the time, I usually say hurt people hurt people. Most of the time, the people that um, do damage are just misguided and unhealed individuals who are replaying their own pain because they haven't processed it. And that's what pain does. It kind of gets passed along. People repeat what they know and what they experienced. So many of us, I know myself included, I parented the way I was parented until I realized that I had other choices. And even still, like, that blueprint is really written strongly in our core, and it's hard to get down there and change those very primal belief systems. But I just want to say I think it's totally possible, and I think it's what we're each called to do in our own way. And while there are so many logistical things and chores and endless lists of things to do, um, there are also lots of emotions that come up to process about losing this way of life. The life that we thought we would gift to our kids is totally different than I imagined it would be. And so it brings up a lot, and I think that um, it makes it difficult sometimes to watch the news or to go through the motions of sort of collecting current events without having those emotions come up in my body. And sometimes I feel completely paralyzed thinking about some of them, and there are really big pieces of grief that come up that are so big that I'm just like, I don't know where you go. Like, where do I put this? And it's not out of context, but it feels awkward to know who to talk to about it sometimes. Um, and this is, having been trained in therapy and also having a therapist who I really love and admire. So I think it's important that we each find places where we can let these things out. And sometimes I think we just need to be able to vent those emotions, to feel that pain or that grief or that anxiety, and just let it flow through us like a weather system, just pass on through. Because there's a lot happening. Like, is this the world that we're leaving our children? Is this what we're doing to our planet? Is the extinction of all of the insects, or the loss of natural resources and land, due to just sort of not thinking it through and whatnot? Is that the legacy we're leaving behind? I mean, it's big, big stuff, and it can weigh really heavily on us. And this last week, it's been weighing really heavily on me. And so sometimes the best thing I can do for myself and the world is to just turn it off and walk away. Like, I just have to. And I need to go cry about all the stress, and I need to just make peace with and let myself feel the feelings around how our world is morphed into something out of like a sci-fi horror movie. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm sure each and every one of you has their own sort of version of ways that the world has become something that you just did not expect it to be. And increasingly, as you wake up, that gets more, that compounds, right? Um, and what kills me about all of this is that I understand that, pain and suffering is sort of part of this whole agreement here. It's honing us, it's helping us be stronger, better humans. But what is annoying is when it's frustratingly preventable, when, we could, like Chris says, it didn't have to be this way, where we could have done something vastly different and kept all of that pain and suffering from ourselves or families. And it makes me sad about us as a species, because I feel like it's our hubris as humans, where we create these self-inflicted wounds, like the ones that we see in the world that are being displayed right now. Politicized medicine is horrible, and the way the pandemic was handled, like, so many people are suffering as a result of those, what's and whose lives have just been destroyed, and they have nobody to turn to, and it's an unknown virus, so an unknown effects of that particular treatment, and so they're just alone and scared and miserable. And I really, that makes me sad, because it didn't have to be this way. We could have been straight up with people, at least given them enough information that they could have made an informed decision. It seems like we're doing that with peak oil and our supply chains around the world and how fragile they are, our reliance on technology and not having skills, because why do you need them? You can just look on YouTube and somebody's doing whatever it is, or Instagram, or and somebody's detailed a how to. So we don't store that here anymore, and we don't have that knowledge like in our bodies and at our fingertips. And anyway, I wonder sometimes, like, is there hope? And I would say yes. And there's tons and tons to be grateful for. One of the things I'm grateful for are my friends. I have a friend named Shelly, and she and I talk a lot about waking up at 3 a.m. and restless with these thoughts and different dreams that are nagging at us when we're mostly asleep. And it's so great to have somebody that I can just be real with, and who's like, yeah, I get it. I have that too. And we bounce ideas off of each other. And those gut instincts, those actually, I think, are our early warning system as humans. And we've lost a lot of our instincts, right? As conscious beings, we probably overthink and perseverate way too much on stuff that doesn't really matter. But our gut is our early warning system. And so I love being able to talk with other people who also are tuning into that. And it's comforting to know that we're not all alone in this story, and that we can, support each other during those sort of freak out sessions that inevitably happen. And I'm curious if you have people that you feel like you can talk to that see the world like you do. And I know it's really intimidating to put yourself out there. And I think we're increasingly going into a period of time where, until things really shift and change, you risk a lot doing that, right? I mean, I really hope that nobody ends up in prison for speaking their truth, but it's happening already. And I feel like if all of us do it, we actually have safety in those numbers. We have safety with each other. And more than that, we have our integrity, which I think is really wonderful. So the reason that I'm talking to you all about the truth in my life and what I've found and what I've struggled with and all of that is so we can find our common ground. And, this time that we're going through right now is definitely adding to the gray hairs that I have. it's also giving me this great opportunity to fine tune what I would say is like the engine of my soul, right? When things are easy, I tend to sort of fall into ruts of thinking and ways of responding that are kind of outdated and maybe more of a knee jerk reaction. So I wouldn't even call them responding, but reacting. And these days, I really do think a lot about what I want my life to mean, what I can use this precious lifetime that I have to do. And I'm thinking more about, spirituality and I've been more prayerful. And I think that there are definitely some really good things that come along with all of the challenges, if that makes sense. And I hope that the time that you and I get to spend together is the best use of this precious time commodity that we have at this moment. And I'm looking forward to doing a deep dive with everyone here about so many different topics. And I'm excited for all of us to put our shoulder behind that wheel, the wheel that is the culture that we're pushing over the edge into the future to create a future worth inheriting. I'm excited for us to put our collective energies together and to push as hard as we know how to. And as I kind of close on this topic, if you are interested in having more conversations like this with other like-minded people, come on over to our website called Peak Prosperity. Because Chris gives a lot of really wonderful, timely information about current events and things that are happening in the world, which you need to know so that you can make the best decisions you can for you and your family. But what's also really incredible there are just tons and tons of forums and questions about everything from, how do you do hydro on your property? What's the best solar installation? Like just you name it, it's there. And what's wonderful is that you're knitting friendship with other people as you discuss these things. So on some level, it didn't have to be this way, but if it has to be this way, I would love for you to find the support that you really need, so that we can be the best that we have to offer in this life. And I'm looking forward to seeing you over there if that's something that sounds interesting to you. Now I'm just going to read a few comments here and see what y'all are talking about, because it's hard for me to do both. Oops. Let me find my mouse here. Okay, here we go. I'll start up at the beginning. Some of these are sort of silly, but prednisone. Nothing like being angry for no reason. Yes, that's true, actually. Prednisone has absolutely gave me like some kind of roid rage that I had never experienced before. I can't actually tolerate that anymore. Life is short. That's why we need good advice, not to spend half of our lives hitting the head into the wall. Evie, have you looked into the carnivore diet? Plenty of anecdotes out there on the healing people have experienced. Yes, actually, that's a huge part of what I'm doing. And it's, I think, helping me a lot. I have way less inflammation going on in my body than I did before, which is so good. Joe says, this is good information. I've been struggling with lumbar pain and was denied surgery because I will not submit to PCR nasal swabbing. Oh my goodness. I can't believe that they won't do a surgery for that reason still at this point. It's just insane. Wow. I'm sorry that's happening to you, Joe. Let's see. Carnivore diet has helped people with anxiety, depression, MS, and more. Perhaps research it and try it for 1 month, Evie. Yes. I I agree. It's actually helped me in every single way. I feel like I have um, more energy and less inflammation, more energy, less anxiety. I definitely, except for just this last week, like I haven't been feeling depressed at all. So it's really remarkable how not eating those inflammatory foods like the sugar or I think grains were doing it for me. Plus, I'm really sensitive to glyphosate, and apparently, there's glyphosate in everything, including like oatmeal has a huge level of it. So you got to watch out for that, even in things that are supposedly organic. So there's no way to really know, which is so hard. Um, well, I let's see, is there more? Evie, when I'm weak, he is strong is a Christian concept. Maybe look deeper there. Yes, absolutely, Natasha. That's part of what I've been feeling as well, that there's actually a blessing to getting to that place where you're feeling like you no longer have the strength to continue going on, that sort of surrendering to that and realizing and recognizing that you can't be all things all the time and that you don't have to be is such a relief. It really is a beautiful thing. And let's see. Libby says, I'm an amazing person, completely vapor locked by narcissistic abuse and life circumstances, preventing me from escaping it. The constant state of grief is crippling. You are an inspiration, Evie. Thank you, Libby. I'm sorry that you're going through that. It just sounds so hard coming from a family situation where the people that were supposed to be there, sort of loving and supporting you, were not doing that is just devastating. And it ripples throughout your life and it makes it very hard to do lots of things. So, yeah, Chris and I are going to be going to something called Pork Fest up in New Hampshire, PORC. It's going on, I think it's beginning this weekend and then goes all through next week into the following weekend. Or maybe it's, excuse me, I might be messing up the dates, but at any rate, we're going to be going there and speaking at a couple of the tents there. So if you are inclined or you live close enough to go to this in New Hampshire, it's really awesome. It's generally libertarian, but I don't want to sort of state what their mission is. You'd have to go check out their website, PORC, not pork as in pig, but PORC as in porcupine. It was, it's going to be a really good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing our friend Tom there, and some other individuals that we just don't get to see all that much. And if there are any peak prosperity people there that we get to bump into, all the better. Wear your hat or something so we can recognize you and find you or find us. And I hope that everybody has had a really good week. I hope that you're getting to spend some time in your garden. I hope that you're trying to grow something, because I think it's just such an amazing educational process, whatever the outcome. And before we go, I wanted to read something to you that I found. Excuse me. My ears are plugged. This is by Stephen Jenkinson. For anybody that doesn't know him, he's amazing. I would recommend checking him out. He's written so many books. One is actually it's called Money and the Soul's Desire. That one's excellent, just about sort of how our longing for money or for wealth can be sort of the evil that drives through our lives. He has a school called the Orphan Wisdom School, and he has a farm up in Nova Scotia, and he teaches younger people, basically anybody that wants to come and listen to him speak. And in the last several years, he did something called the Nights of Grief and Mystery, and those were incredible as well. It was like he had put music to a lot of his his inner musings. He's just a really incredible writer. And what I love is that the reason that he arrived where he has in terms of his philosophy of life is that he used to escort people through the death process. Like he would be there when they were having palliative care or whatnot, and he would help them, like as a minister, I think, come to the grips of where they were and what was happening to them. And he just really didn't beat around the bush with that, and he was very straightforward with them about that. And he just learned so much from that. And one of the big takeaways was that we live in a very death phobic culture, and the way we know that is how we live, because you're dying, and the idea that you're not going to live forever should inform on some level what you do every day, right? And so he talks about how dying well is so important and how it's a skill, and it's something that we kind of hide away in the deeper recesses of our culture and behind closed doors, but that none of us really have a ton of experience knowing how to cope with that death very intimately, until it happens to us and we're kind of caught unaware. And so anyway, he's just a really phenomenal human, and I love his work. Do check him out if you get a chance. He's talking about here about the skills for making human culture. He says, knowledge in an information drunk, competence addicted culture like our own must be life tested, the life tested skill of gathering what is needed to make life without killing life in the gathering. Wisdom is the place where knowledge is fired, forged, and annealed to become something of great beauty, useful to the world. Human culture is made when that beauty swells into life and dies to nourish a time we won't live to see. Knowledge gathers wood and flint and gut. Wisdom conjures a cranky, playable fiddle from the gatherings. People who have been bathed in the grief and love for life play some small magnificence on those fiddles together and sing their unknown songs and make human culture. I just like how he thinks. Well, thank you everybody for joining me this afternoon. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and turn on the notifications if you want to find out when we have new offerings on this channel. It is always a pleasure to spend some time with you, and I will look very much forward to seeing you again next Thursday at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much.